Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Let's see, we've got about 20 people joined so far. We'll wait a few minutes for everyone to hop on.
Okay. Are we good to get started?
Sure. Looks like we've got about 36 attendees in the three of us, so I'll get started if you want me to.
Okay, great.
Great.
Let's see. I have a few slides to go over. So, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I am Janicia Thompson, the Higher Education Innovation Strategy Assistant at MCAN. And today we have our webinar, Demystifying Sticker Price of Independent Colleges and Universities. So before I hand it over to Colby, there are a few reminders that I wanted to go over, such as how this webinar is eligible for one sketch in college prep. If you did not request a sketch when you registered or enter your PIC number, but you are attending live, please email sketch@mycollegeaccess.org with your name, the name of this webinar, and your PIC number. Sketches will be processed within 30 days, and if after that 30-day mark you still don't see your sketch available in your MOEX account, please email the same sketch@mycollegeaccess.org email, and our staff that monitors that will be able to assist you. So if you are watching the recording of this webinar, you are still able to earn your sketch credit by completing the quiz that will be linked on our website, and the password for the quiz will be given at the end of this webinar. If you're watching this live, again, you don't need to complete the quiz, and the recording that is eligible for the sketch credit will be up until January 6th, 2026. So now I will hand it over to our guests. I'll let you introduce yourselves.
Sure. Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. I'm Colby Cesaro with Michigan Independent Colleges and Universities, and I have my colleague here. Mauro, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Mauro Gallus. I'm not sure if you can see me on a video or not, but hey, that's why I have a photo. Happy to be here from the MICU team helping present out on this topic.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So today we're going to go over a presentation called Demystifying Sticker Price at Independent Colleges in Michigan. We often hear from other high school counselors that they would really like to consider an independent nonprofit institution for their students, but the sticker price of college at many independent colleges is really high. However, that's often not the price that students are paying, the majority of students, in fact. And at some institutions, absolutely nobody is paying the sticker price. So we want to make sure that everyone understands that at independent colleges in Michigan, there are affordable options for every student. And so, as counselors, looking at the best fit school for your students really matters, and not just where it seems to be at face value less expensive. So I'm going to go through the presentation, and then we have a new guidebook coming out that you'll get a copy of at the MCAN conference, and then MCAN is also going to be sending them out where Each institution has a page with updated data on information about enrollment and student outcomes. And so it's a good resource for your students to look at as they're trying to figure out where to apply for college this fall and winter. All right, so I'm going to share my presentation here. Okay, so is it sharing the slideshow? Is that working? Yeah, great.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so I already introduced myself. Oops. Okay, so here are our institutions and a map of Michigan. And this map is currently being updated because Concordia University is no longer in Ann Arbor. They have closed their Michigan location. And Siena Heights University, while it still exists this year, is not going to be open for the next academic year. So those two institutions are not going to be on the updated map, but everyone else is still here. And you can see we've got lots of institutions in Southeast Michigan, some clusters over on the west side, and a lot of locations spread throughout the lower peninsula. So in all, we have about 25 independent nonprofit colleges and universities in the state. And looking at some of the names, you might see a few that you recognize. This is a picture of our guidebook from last year, so hopefully you all got that last year. And at the end of this, we'll do a little preview of our new guidebook that's up and coming in final revision, so you get to see the preview before it goes to print. All right, so let's talk about data. Where did we get the numbers about sticker price versus what students are actually paying? We use federally reported data from IPEDS, the Integrated Post-Secondary Education Data System. So any institution of higher education that accepts Title IV aid, that means Pell, student loans, SEOG, federal work study, any institution that has funding in that Title IV bucket is required to report a bunch of data to the IPED system. And this is everything from enrollment to student costs to institutional mission, even human resources data. You can see, average faculty salaries, as well as audited financial data. So we can see actual revenues coming into an institution versus just what a sticker price is. That's where we're trying to get the nuance of what students are actually paying. So this data is also what feeds into College Scorecard and College Navigator. So if you're using Scorecard or Navigator to really dive deep into data and information for your students on their schools that they're interested in, IPEDS is the data that's reported everywhere. Now, there's also My School data that exists in Michigan for Michigan institutions, but not all institutions across the state report to My School data. So we do highly recommend using the federal data as well as Scorecard and Navigator because you're really going to get a more apples to apples comparison across the board, especially if your students are looking at out-of-state schools versus in-state schools. All right, so that's the data. All right, so college costs a lot. It is expensive, but it's probably not as much as you'd think. So we want to talk about sticker price versus actual price. So at independent colleges and universities in Michigan, 84% of undergrads receive grants or scholarships to attend the college. This is compared to 70% at public universities. So this means on average, about 16% of students at our institutions are paying the sticker price and 84% are not. At public universities, 30% of students are paying the sticker price and 70% are not. So the actual price, the net price that students are really charged is really meaningful regardless of sector. So this is something important to consider because there's grants and scholarships. You know about the Michigan Achievement Scholarship. That's the big one right now. But there's a lot of other scholarships and grants available that shift the actual price for a student. Okay. So 84%, that's nearly every student, yes. But how much are students actually receiving? Well, last year, the average student at an independent nonprofit institution received about $21,000 in institutional aid. So this is not the Achievement Scholarship. This isn't Pell. This isn't the Rotary Club or any other local funding. This is from the institution. So this is often merit-based aid. It could be an athletic scholarship, but this is the average across the freshman class last year at independent nonprofit institutions in Michigan. Um, it's about 11,500 at public universities. So that's that. You can see that differential. And also remember, public universities are receiving appropriations from the state to operate. Private nonprofit institutions in Michigan do not receive any money from the state or local governments to function. Any funding that comes in from the state would be attached to a student. So the Achievement Scholarship's a good example of funding that would be connected to the student. It's not like funding to build a building or to operate. All right. So for most students, the sticker price of college is meaningless. It absolutely is. You see what the tuition and fees are, but are you actually paying that? You really have to dive into the financial aid award letters. So here is it's a very overwhelming slide because there's lots of numbers and lots of lines, but it's more for effect. The red bar is the sticker price, cost of attendance. So this is going to be tuition and fees and room and board and other charges. That would be the cost of attendance for a student to attend a private nonprofit institution. And if you look at out-of-state tuition and fees at a public, this is really quite similar. Because this is really, if you think about the cost to educate a student. If you look at the blue bar, the like bluish purpley bar, periwinkle maybe, the average price actually paid on average. Yes, I used average twice in that one. So that's the average price actually paid by students. And then, pardon me, the gray is the average price for our lowest income students. So we did a calculation looking at the average net price for students with incomes below 50,000. That's your typical Pell population. And then that's the number with the red box. So let's look at an example here, Hope College. If you're paying sticker price at Hope College, it's $58,200 a year for tuition, fees, room, and board. But if you look at your lowest income students, the net price that they're actually charged is $15,000. That's a big difference. And you may have students not want to look at Hope or not want to look, we'll go next door, Kalamazoo, $77,000 sticker price. That sounds just wild. But for your lower income students, their net price is almost $14,000. That's a really big difference. And the differential for some of our institutions is not as high. So one I'll point out is Lawrence Tech is a good example. Kettering is also another example where the price for even your lower income students seems quite high at $26,000 and $30,000. But at these institutions, they have a co-op model where you're in school part of the time and then you're working in the field part of the time also and earning quite a bit of money. So those net prices are higher because it takes into account the fact that the student is working as part of their education. So that's something to consider too. If your student's interested in going into engineering at Kettering, they're going to be in class for a quarter or a semester and then working for a quarter or semester and then hopping back and forth that whole time. And they're getting paid for that work. So that's not just, it's simply more expensive, but they're getting that on the job experience and getting compensated. So this is one of those comparisons where it's really to illustrate the major differential in the cost of what sticker price might be, because that's what you're going to see on a lot of advertising, or even just at first blush when you look at a website for an institution. But go down and see what the net price actually is. And for many students, they won't know unless they fill out a FAFSA and apply. So the gap between sticker price and actual price is huge. On average, it's about 55% difference. So this is just for the average net price. So overall sticker price, $52,000. Average net price, about $24,000. That's not that different than public universities. University of Michigan, I believe, for tuition and fees only is about $18,000 or $19,000 this coming fall, which is just tuition and fees. That doesn't count room and board. If you add room and board in, it's close to 30, maybe a little higher. So when we consider the price differential, it's important to consider that institutional aid because there are donors and other scholarship sources at private nonprofit colleges to support students so that at the end of the day, you're not actually paying more. You're just getting a different type of education. So this all goes to talk more about why your students should be choosing their best fit, where they're going to be the most successful and get the services they need, fit in on campus, and not just about, oh, well, it seems like this institution is cheaper than the other one. Obviously, the real dollars matter, but we know that sticker price is not the reality for the majority of your students. Okay, so this graphic shows the percentage difference in sticker price versus average net price for the lowest income students. So Albion's a good example. It's 85% less than one might think. So this is essentially, if we think about the discount, there is something official called a discount rate. That's not what this is. This is just showing the differential in sticker price versus what your lower income students are actually going to be paying to attend these schools. All right, so let's talk about debt because this is something that matters, and debt is scary and it's all over the news still. It's been all over the news for over a decade now. And it's important to consider because for many families, if they're not used to borrowing lots of money or don't have a lot of really terrifying. All right, so in Michigan, about 50% of students take out loans to help pay for college. It's not everybody. This is an important fact to consider. Only half of students at independent colleges and universities in Michigan actually take out student loans. That means 50% of students don't take out student loans. They don't need them. That was actually a big game changer with the Achievement Scholarship because it's $5,500. It's pretty close to the average amount that students would take in student loans from the federal government for undergrad each year. And for many students, they didn't need to take out debt because the Achievement Scholarship filled in what they needed. So it's important to remember that not everyone borrows, and you can't just borrow what you want. There's a lot of counseling work that goes into what students are borrowing from the federal government. Federal loans for undergraduates are limited each year. You can't borrow as much as you want. You can't just say, oh, I'm going to borrow $20,000. That's not possible. There are Parent Plus loans, so parents can borrow, but those are also limited. And for family, if you hear about a student who has hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt from undergrad, they likely took private loans separate from what's available from the Department of Ed. That's a very different concept than what we're talking about here. What we're talking about here are undergraduate student loans from the federal government. Okay, average amount of debt that students take. It's about $7,000 per year. And this has been declining lately, so that's been helpful to see the student loan counseling does work. You help students understand how much you really need because you might be eligible to borrow more. You know, you could borrow up to $8,000 or $9,000 maybe, but do you need it? That's important to consider. But we also want students to borrow enough that they can go full time. That's the point of the student loan is to help you pay for college and complete on time. If you can borrow so you don't have to work and take all of your credits and graduate in 4 years, that's meaningful. Because if you need to work and you're not going to graduate until 6 or 7 years later, that's additional years where you have to pay tuition, and it actually ends up being more expensive in the long run. So the concept of student debt, as much as these big, large numbers that we hear on the news, it's very scary. These small amounts each year for the students who need them are meaningful because it is important to attend and take enough credits. It's important to focus on school so that you can complete on time. And if you have to work also, if you can reduce your hours so you're not so overburdened, that really, really makes a difference. All right. So for students who borrow, we say 50% of students on average are borrowing. How much debt do they have upon graduation? Well, it's about $30,000. So we assume $7,000 a year on average. It's about 4 to 4.5 years for completion on average at independent nonprofit colleges and universities, depending on your program. Like if you're in teacher prep or engineering, your program is likely 4.5 to 5 years. For others, 4 is sufficient. So it's about $30,000. So what else costs $30,000? Well, that's less than a new car. It's about the same cost as a relatively inexpensive wedding these days, a down payment on a house. There's a lot of things that cost about $30,000. But if we look at this, actually, a new car these days is about $45,000. That's pretty terrifying. This graph shows the average student loans going back to 1993 and average auto loans going back to the same time period. And it's interesting to see how they track pretty similarly until we hit around the COVID time and there was a major supply chain issue. And obviously, car costs went up quite a bit. So it's just a fun visual to see them. We're not making the assumption that people are actually deciding whether or not to buy a car or to go to college, but it's just a helpful reference point of what someone might consider acceptable debt. Like, oh yeah, you get a new car loan, for sure, you need a car. But taking on debt to go to college, even a small amount of debt, may seem daunting. So if we look at the value of what you're getting, and again, I'm doing the car comparison, not because it's a real comparison, but just because we think about these things being about the same price. So for example, let's say your new car, you've got a $32,000 loan, brand new. The moment you drive it off the lot, it's going to reduce in value because it's not an investment asset. It is a consumable good. You use your car. That's the whole point. You use it and it's going to decline in value. After a year, it's only worth 25,000. And then by the fifth year, it's only worth 12,000. But your degree increases in value each year, it goes up. And what's interesting about it is you can look at, and I'm going to get some calculus in here, you can sum the area under the curve, and that's going to be your value. Because every year your income goes up, it's aggregated. That's the value, is that it's really, really going up. So by the time you are at year 5, your degree is worth 11 times your initial $30,000 loan. Because for many students, when you come out of undergrad, you're not making $50,000 or $60,000 a year. You may be making 30. That's very reasonable. But 5 years later, you might be making 70. And 10 years later, you might be making over $100,000. However, if you don't go to college or if you don't complete your degree, your likelihood of increasing your wages is really, really minimal. All of this is about making families better off, making students better off. And if you finish your degree, you're going to have higher earning potential throughout the rest of your career. All right, so what do we know? What else do we know about average net price here? So every financial aid package is unique. We're just sharing averages here. So many students may receive more grant and scholarship funding or less. These are all averages. So there's a broad range inside. So you may have a student that applies to one of our institutions and gets a full ride, housing included. Great. You may have a student that doesn't get that, but they get the Michigan Achievement Scholarship, they get some merit-based aid from the institution, they have a federal work-study package, all of these things you won't know unless a student applies. So private grants not through the school, state, or federal governments are not included. So what's not included here are any like Rotary Club I mentioned earlier. If there's any other private scholarships that students have applied for, that's not included in here. So that's obviously just extra, that if you have students applying for those, that would, be added on. Also, some institutions discount even further, but don't consider those in the net price calculation. So this is something to know, again, until a student applies and you see a financial aid package, you're not going to know. Also, many of you who have been working in this field for a long time know that you can call a school and talk with a financial aid team and negotiate. That's something that students can do. Not some students think that it's just, oh, this is the letter, this is what I get. No, call and ask for more. The worst they're going to say is no. And for many students, that's a good jumping off point to developing that relationship with a school, especially if it's a place they really want to go. Co-ops and paid internships, especially engineering and design schools, we talked about this earlier, they provide significant income, and thus the net price is often higher. So just to say that again, that's something important to consider. If your student's going into a school that has co-oping or work as part of the curriculum and they're getting paid for it, that net price might be a little bit higher because it assumes that some of that income is going to be helping to pay tuition. But like I said before, you aren't going to know your unique estimated net price without applying and filing a FAFSA. You got to do it. Okay, so will I have to pay to apply? So only 6 out of our 25 independent colleges have an application fee, and those 6 will waive it. You just have to ask. So most of our institutions are pretty open on applications. You're not going to be spending money to apply. And for the ones that do have the application fee, they will waive it if you ask. All right, the Michigan Achievement Scholarship, we all hopefully know about this. It's really important to consider $5,500 a year for up to 5 years for college in Michigan. If your student is starting at a community college, that is also important to note because they might get the CC guarantee and then want to transfer. Many of our institutions will take their full MTA, Michigan Transfer Agreement, or their full associate's degree for junior status. So if you're working with a student that wants to start at a community college because they can live at home, if they're going to be there for 2 years, they're going to get that free tuition in district for the CC guarantee. They can transfer to an independent nonprofit for their bachelor's and still get the achievement scholarship. So you don't have to start at a 4-year institution to finish at a 4-year institution. You just have to get to college within 15 months of high school graduation to start the whole process of receiving achievement or the CC guarantee. All right, this is our list of institutions that have tuition-free programs associated with the Achievement Scholarship. So Albion, Cleary, Baker, Aquinas, Cornerstone, Madonna, Olivet, Rochester, Spring Arbor, Detroit Mercy. And that's just the ones that are advertising it. For many institutions, if you have the Achievement Scholarship and a Pell Grant, the likelihood of having any tuition charge is pretty minimal. So thank you very much. Do you want, I'm going to ask MCAN team, do you want me to take questions now or go through the guidebook? We can look through our guidebook first and then maybe take some questions.
Yeah, that sounds great. The guidebook first.
Yeah, we can do that. Okay. And remember, this guidebook is the preview. If you see a typo, let us know because it's not finalized yet. All right, let me get to it. Okay, we got a new picture in the front, Michigan in all its snowy glory. All right, so, and we thank MCAN for their partnership on this because this guidebook for all of you and your students would not be possible without the support and help from MCAN. So this guidebook highlights a few things. The first one is, why is college worth it? And this data, sometimes when you're a young person, you don't really wrap your mind around all the numbers and the finances and especially the long-term side. But for parents, that is important. And on for getting a college degree, what are some things that you're more likely to have and do? Well, if you have a college degree, you're likely to make a lot more money over your lifetime than someone who doesn't have a college degree. And what does that really mean? It's not just about more money. It's about staying employed when the economy takes a turn. It's about having a job that has retirement benefits and healthcare benefits that you don't have to pay as much extra for. People who have a degree are more likely to own a home. They're also more likely to be healthier and have lower medical costs in general. So all of these things are like long-term thinking, and it's sometimes hard as an 18-year-old to really think about that. But if you ask the average person, what do you want out of life? They're like, I want to be able to buy a house. I want to be able to retire and have money in retirement. The likelihood of someone having a really solid retirement on Social Security alone is really slim to none. And the likelihood of having great retirement savings is a lot higher if you have a job that gives you those benefits. And the likelihood of having a job like that really comes with a bachelor's degree. So we also talk about why an independent college makes a difference. And something to consider is on-time graduation. And your typical, Mauro and I were talking about this today, your typical 18-year-old isn't thinking like, oh, it might take me 6 or 7 years to finish college instead of 4. Everyone kind of assumes they're going to college for 4 years. But where do people actually only go for 4 years? And you have a higher likelihood of completing a degree in 4 years at an independent college than you do at one of the public universities. And it's just a different environment. You have more flexibility, you have a lot more personal attention. And for many of our students, if you look at, there's actually Michigan Achievement Scholarship data on this, but if you look at the typical number of credits that students are taking at different institutions, more students at independent nonprofit colleges are taking 15 or more. And that's what you need to complete in 4 years. If you take fewer than 15 credits a semester, you can't finish a bachelor's degree in less than 4, unless you're transferring in a ton of dual enrollment or early middle college credits, which again, you change your major, there's all kinds of things that you would do that would increase the number of credits you have to take. So that on-time completion does make a difference, because if you go an extra 5th year or a 6th year or a 7th year, that's way more tuition money that you have to pay. And it's years that you're not in the labor force, starting to make money, starting to save for retirement, and then moving up that career ladder. All right. Whoops. Okay, we talk about FAFSA. Obviously, this matters. We talk about financial aid and the difference between grants and scholarships versus loans versus work study. There's a lot of different ways to read a financial aid award letter. We're actually hoping there's some more federal legislation soon that forces a format for financial aid award letters so that all institutions have to comply and have the same format. It would make it so much easier for students to really see side by side, apples to apples comparisons. And right now, that's not necessarily the case. So it can be confusing when you're getting award letters from lots of different institutions. We talk about applying for financial aid. Again, FAFSA, FAFSA, FAFSA. There's no way around it. We need more students to do it. It came out early this year. Surprise. I was thrilled to see that. We also talk about student debt. So similar to the data that we shared in this presentation, 50% of students are borrowing, not 100, so that's good to know. Also, that 30,000 upon graduation for students who do borrow. So we're not talking about 100 and $200,000 in debt for undergrad. That is super atypical. All right. And transfer. So this is a new section in our guidebook talking about transfer. So all of our institutions are listed here, and whether or not they participate and accept the Michigan Transfer Agreement. So you hear about this. Some of your students may have dual enrollment credits or other credits that would count towards that. Or they're at a community college and there's a set of general education classes that would count towards the transfer agreement. There's also something called the transfer pathways. And so you'll see here on the page, there's art, biology, business, communications, criminal justice, exercise science, mechanical engineering, psychology, public health, and social work, with more to come. So these are called the transfer pathways. And the idea is that institutions that are part of the transfer pathway accept the full associate's degree into their program. So for example, if you are majoring in art and you want to go to the College for Creative Studies and you are at a community college and you have an associate's degree in art and design or whatever specific art field, you can transfer that into College for Creative Studies, assuming you get accepted, and you essentially begin as a junior. And that's the whole idea of these pathways. So for many institutions, if they don't have the degree field, they can't participate in the pathway. So I wouldn't look at, mechanical engineering and say, oh, Aquinas College doesn't participate in the mechanical engineering pathway. Well, they don't have a mechanical engineering degree, so that doesn't make sense for them. And so for some of them, the institutions are still working on getting those partnerships signed, but for others, they just don't have the degree field. But there are a lot of opportunities, especially in some highly enrolled programs, business, psychology, communications, biology. All of these fields are really popular. If you want to go to medical school, biology, that's a high value major there. Business, that's a really important one. Lots of students are majoring in different types of business. So these transfer pathways are important because if you have a student starting at a community college, they can see, oh, wow, if I'm going to my local community college and I want to transfer to Northwood for my business degree, awesome. Northwood will accept your associate's degree. You kick in junior status and can finish 2 years there. And actually, I mentioned Northwood because they have some of the best outcomes for transfer students. Their students really are 2+2, and then you're moving on. They also have a 5-year program that's bachelor's to master's, and you end up with an MBA at the end of your 5th year, which is pretty cool. All right, yay, transfer. Then we have a page about every institution. So these are not quite fully updated yet, but all of our institutions that are going to have students in the fall of 2026 are here. Each institution gets a page with some highlights about the school, as well as contact information, some data on enrollment, the admissions information, some student cost examples, as well as some other campus facts. So you'll see if there's an athletic conference, if athletics are important to your students, which institutions are NCAA versus MIA. The admissions rate, I think this is something that's important. We don't always think about what percentage of students are admitted to institutions. We assume that some of the more highly selective institutions are like Harvard and Yale and only accept, 5% of applicants or something teeny tiny. That's not the case. Like Albion College is a good example. Albion's actually a pretty selective institution, high achieving students, excellent academics, but they accept 81% of students who apply. And they also don't require test scores. They're totally test blind. They're not even considered as part of admission. So these are important factors to consider when you're looking at a school. It's, what's my likelihood of getting in? What's the fit? Is this the type of student experience I want? Is this the size I want? 1,300 students. Do I want a smaller, intimate environment? Do you want a school that has grad programs? That's, important to consider. Lots of our private nonprofit colleges are undergraduate only, or if they do have graduate students, it's a handful because it's just a few programs. So as we go through, we can see each of our schools on here: Alma College, Andrews, Aquinas, Baker, Calvin, Cleary, College for Creative Studies, Cornerstone, Davenport, Great Lakes Christian College, Hope College, Kalamazoo College, Kettering, Lawrence Tech, Madonna. Michigan School of Psychology is graduate only, but they have some really robust transfer agreements or partnership agreements with our undergraduate institutions in psychology, because Michigan School of Psychology is specific to clinical psych, master's and doctoral degrees. So it's quite small, but it's really hyper-focused. So if you have students who are interested in clinical psych, they could start at one of our other institutions in psychology and then transfer in as a master's or PhD student in Michigan School of Psychology. Northwood, Rochester Christian, Spring Arbor, University of Olivet, University of Detroit Mercy, and Walsh. Walsh is another unique one. They don't have lower division undergrads. There are no freshmen and sophomore students. They're only juniors and seniors and graduates. So every student at Walsh is a transfer student. So if you're coming from a community college, or maybe you came from a different four-year institution, private or public, and then you want to go to business school, Walsh is a great place to transfer in for those. And then the list of all of our institutions on the back. All right. Any questions? Any interests? Any students that are looking at our institutions here? We'd love to have your thoughts.
If there's any questions in the chat too, happy to read them from there. I don't see any just yet, but
Well, thank you, Colby, for a great presentation. Let's see. Of course, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, put them in the Q&A section, especially as I start to wrap things up here. Um, I will start sharing my screen momentarily.
Are there any overarching questions folks have with that students have brought to your attention or, looking forward this year, future years about this process? All right, quiet group.
Yeah.
No worries.
Okay. Again, there are a couple of reminders, and if you have any questions or thoughts as we wrap things up, please feel free to enter them in. So this webinar is eligible for up to one sketch and college prep credit. If you did not submit your PIC number when you registered for this webinar and you would like to earn a sketch, please email sketch@mycollegeaccess.org with your name, the name of the webinar, and your PIC number. Oops, and I see a couple of questions that came in.
Oh, great.
Let's see.
Oh, there it is. Will we have access to the chart comparison, college and cars? Yeah, it's actually on our website. So if you go to the My College's website, we've got a whole student debt document and one pager, so I can share that out for MCAN to send. But it's also on the independent colleges website. Um,
Just put in the chat.
yep, Mauro just put it in the chat if that's available. College versus car. Okay, I have a student interested in Madonna. Can you share more about them? Sure. So Madonna's a Catholic institution and they're in Livonia.
Right.
They're in the Southeast Michigan land of like 275, 1496 swirling highways. So I don't quite know if it's like Livonia or Southfield or it's Livonia. And they have a really, really strong series of programs in health and allied health. And they're lovely. I mean, they have a new president as of a couple of years ago. They have some excellent athletic programs, really strong academics and student supports. They have a lot of commuter students and on-campus students. And interestingly, I was actually at an event with the president this past week, and he was saying that they have a lot more students living on campus this year than they had originally anticipated. So it seems like more students are wanting to be on campus. And so it's a great location too, because you're close to a lot of things being in Southeast Michigan. I will say for a lot of our institutions, some of them have a religious focus, others don't. You really can get just about everything and anything you want. And I think that's where we get the student fit as a high value concept at independent institutions. If you have a student that has a particular religious conviction, you may find that on campus at some of our schools. And for some of our institutions, they may have an interest in a particular type of student group or athletics. That's something to consider for student athletes too. Most of our institutions are D2 or D3, Division 2 or Division 3, depending on the sport. But if you've got someone who, let's say they're a soccer player, they want to keep playing soccer in college, but they're not going to play for a big Division 1 school, they could play at one of our institutions and have a great college athletic career and end up playing the whole time. Um, and so that's something to consider also. I know Adrian College apparently has 3 hockey teams. So hockey's really big. I think every one of our schools actually has a hockey team. So yeah, those are all those different nuances of what college experience students really want to have. And I would encourage you to looking once we have the final guidebook out, the student to faculty ratio makes a big difference at our schools. For many of ours, you're going to have classes taught by professors, not grad students, professors, because faculty are everything at an independent nonprofit. And your class sizes are not going to have 500 people. They're going to have 20 people. And you have a really different experience when you're in a lecture hall with 500 people versus a classroom with 20 other people. And that's just one of those more nuanced differences that you get at a private nonprofit college compared to maybe a bigger state school. Mhm. Any other questions? Well, hopefully all of you can go back to your students and know that if they're interested in one of our schools, or if you think that one of our smaller institutions would be a good fit, that cost should not be considered the same factor, because when you put the numbers side by side for a state university versus a private nonprofit, it's about the same. Maybe even less at one of our schools.
Great. Let's see.
Thank you.
We're gonna
Anybody
slow.
else?
Again, if you, as an attendee, have any more questions, please feel free to continue to submit them or put them in the chat. Um, there you go. Okay. So for those who are recording the webinar or watching the recording of the webinar, please complete the quiz that will be found on our website to earn your sketch credit. The password for the quiz is listed here in bold and it's in orange. It is independent. And again, if you are watching this live, you do not need to take the quiz. Only those who are watching the recording will need to take it. The sketch is eligible until January 6th, 2026. And for those who are watching the recording, your sketch will be processed within 30 days from the day you complete the quiz. Let's see. So here are our upcoming webinars. As you all know, it's Michigan College Month. So we have an array of admissions updates that we are hosting. The High School Innovation Department specifically is hosting. And so here are a few ranging from tomorrow up until the 14th, but we are doing these admissions updates with different schools, public and private schools, two-year schools, tribal colleges as well, throughout the whole month of October as we began on October 1st. So please feel free to check that out on our website and be sure to register if you have not yet done so. And I will also put a link to all of the web pages I'm saying to go visit in the chat as well. Um, so next we have our annual conference. This will be held at the Lansing Center in downtown Lansing from November 4th through the 5th. And let's see, registration, there are about 10 days left to register for our conference. So please feel free to register if you have not yet, as we would love to have you there and see you. And then we also have our e-news. If you're not signed up for our e-newsletter yet, please do so if you'd like to stay up to date with our efforts, information, events, and webinars such as this. And we have this, this comes out every other Thursday as well. So let me go ahead and put all of this in the chat. And so, yes, thank you all for joining us today. It was great to have you all.
Thanks so much for having us. Feel free to reach out if you have questions.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you all.